15. September 1952. Wiesbaden, Hesse. A schoolteacher named Karl writes in his notebook a line he will not speak aloud at the faculty meeting, 1952, West Germany. I teach the 30 Years' War, Bismarck, and 1945. The children never ask what happened to the people who used to own the shop on the corner. He has lived with ruins. He has watched a city reassemble itself around gaps it does not name. He stands before a class and charts dynasties, dates, treaties. He leaves blank space where certain names used to be. He writes a curriculum that looks like safety. He teaches continuity so that the breaks remain hidden in plain sight. There is a method to this. There is an arithmetic to silence. It begins in 1945 with the mathematics of food, coal, and roofs. 6 April 1945. The U.S. Third Army enters Wiesbaden. The last Wehrmacht units pull back across the Rhine. An American military government office opens in a requisitioned hotel on Wilhelmstrasse. The city surrenders without a fight. The occupation reports describe a place of ash and precarity. The Allied intelligence summaries measure everything: tons of rubble per block, numbers of functioning wells, the percentage of rail ties intact, civilians counted in queues, curfews announced at 9 p.m., notices posted in German and English at street corners. Keep your hands in view. Do not congregate. The fear of retribution circulates like a rumor you can smell. A photograph from 18 April shows a line of women in headscarves outside a bakery, all looking at the camera with that half-challenging, half-vacant stare common to April 1945 images. Behind them, a shopfront with its glass missing. A signboard wedged into a pile of brick reads, "Zu verkaufen, Möbel." Everything is for sale. There is no money. The Allied authorities count what matters for survival. The mathematics of 1945 is calories per person per day. The arithmetic of heat is kilograms of coal per household per month. The arithmetic of safety is names on a list. The list must not include you. The first Trümmerfrauen arrive with shovels and bare hands. Not all of them are volunteer heroines. Many are compelled, rounded up by local councils fulfilling directives. They lift bricks, knock off mortar, stack them in piles of usable and unusable, salvage iron from bent rebar. They fill handcarts and push them to the curb. A record in the Wiesbaden City Archive from June documents 31 registered women on rubble duty. 3 collapsed from exhaustion that week, 1 broke a wrist. Bundles of salvaged wood are doled out under watch. The arithmetic is brutal. The rubble per capita in German cities in 1945 is measured in tens of cubic meters. Berlin is drowning in slag. Cologne's cathedral still stands over a plain of broken brick. Wiesbaden, spared some of the worst, still staggers. The city council minutes describe 29,800 dwellings damaged and 3,000 when 12 totally destroyed. The arithmetic of rooms works like this: 1 family per intact room, 1 expellee family per partial room, 2 men on straw in the hallway. There is a phrase for this in the paperwork: Zwangseinquartierung, forced lodging. Karl was 33 in April 1945. He had been trained as a history teacher before the war. In 1937, he signed papers to join the National Socialist Teachers League. He wears that decision in his denazification file like a stain that only he can see. He spent much of the war years in an office at the Hessian School Inspectorate, processing requisitions, planning timetables that war never respected. He was conscripted briefly in 1944, wounded in training in an accident that never quite healed, and sent back to his desk as a non-deployable reserve. He knows what this means in an interrogation report, Mitläufer, follower. He hopes the form will translate his biography into safety. A letter survives from 2 May 1945. It is addressed to a cousin in the countryside. We would be grateful for 2 kilograms of potatoes if possible. The child will not stop crying at night. There is no sugar. The child is his neighbor's. The sugar will arrive 6 weeks later in a crate that smells of grass. The first thing that everyone learns is the new order of objects. Ration cards with perforated corners. Paper money with faces no one recognizes. Cigarettes as a coinage of real value, the way a stack of Lucky Strikes aligns with the arithmetic of meat and butter. An Allied civil affairs officer writes in a weekly summary for the U.S. zone, late May 1945, local markets indicate complete substitution of barter economy. Cigarettes function as quasi-currency across all classes. The report lists the going rates. 1 kilogram of butter, 20 cigarettes, 1 pair of shoes, 80, a wristwatch, 100, and a bottle of spirits. This is the mathematics of hunger. Official rations in the U.S. zone dropped below 1,200 calories per day by the winter of 1946-47. The hunger winter is a phrase that enters diaries as a proper noun. Potato harvests fail in the freeze. Coal deliveries arrive late. The arithmetic of heat is the arithmetic of survival. 3 briquettes? 4? A man on a bicycle with a sack on his back cycles out of town to barter his wife's coat for turnips. These journeys acquire a name in the vernacular: Hamsterfahrten, hamster trips, cheeks stuffed with whatever can be carried. An oral history from a woman in nearby Mainz recounts the taste of sugar beets boiled into a syrup that tastes like bitterness and relief. "We ate it with black bread," she says. "You could chew it forever." In June 1945, the Allied forces post a notice. All party members of the Allied forces post a notice. AF and affiliated organizations must register. The denazification machinery begins with questionnaires. The Fragebogen is a form of 48 questions. Your name, date of birth, party membership, affiliations, offices held, donations made, committees served. Did you contribute to winter relief collections? Did you attend official rallies? Did you denounce anyone? The line for explanatory remarks is a narrow box that people turn into paragraphs. The denazification files that survive in the Hessian archives are thick with these cramped confessions and rationalizations. The Sprechkammer hearing is a simple theater. There is a judge, a clerk, sometimes a prosecutor. There are neighbors who appear as witnesses. There are Perselschein, letters of exoneration named after detergent, asserting that this man, this woman, may have worn the badge but did no harm. The categories are rigid in theory. Hauptschuldige, major offenders; Belastet, offenders; Mitbelastet, lesser offenders; Mitläufer, followers; Entlastet, exonerated. In practice, the mathematics of denazification is the mathematics of workforce. Doctors are scarce, teachers are scarce, police are scarce. The new state needs the old functionaries to function. The files show that conviction rates drop quickly under pressure. In Hesse, by 1949, the majority of cases are filed under Mitläufer. The arithmetic of guilt is flattened out, redistributed as a kind of administrative compromise. Karl appears before a Sprechkammer in early 1947. The file notes that he joined the NSLB in 1937, that he could not have kept his post otherwise. A neighbor writes a Perselschein. He was a decent man and never spoke ill of Jews. The phrase "spoke ill of" is a fragile alibi. It cannot be tested. The clerk writes, Category 4, Mitläufer. Vienna papers will later reproduce tables that show the same pattern across zones. The mathematics is consistent. For every major offender punished, dozens of followers return to their desks, their classrooms, their precincts. The justice is partial, delayed, often symbolic. The stability is real. The city changes its shape. Rubble becomes building material. The women in headscarves teach themselves to recognize good brick by the sound of a tap with a hammer. When it rings, it can be reused. When it thuds, it will always bear the memory of fire. Children play in the gaps. They collect shrapnel and Allied cartridge cases and sell them to scrap dealers to buy hazelnuts. The men who return from Soviet captivity paste notices on walls, searching for my wife Gerda, last seen August 1944 in Frankfurt. These notices accumulate into a new kind of public archive, missing people boards. In a Bundesarchiv photograph from 1946, a ration office in Wiesbaden is packed with figures in heavy coats. A notice behind the clerk's desk explains the categories. A for manual labor, B for moderate work, C for sedentary, H for heavy. The mathematics of work becomes the mathematics of bread. If you lift bricks, you might live a day longer in the ledger. If you keep books, you receive a number that makes you cold. The displaced are everywhere. The US Army designates displaced persons camps across its zone. Jewish survivors, Polish and Ukrainian forced laborers, Romanian refugees, many stateless. Feldafing, Landsberg, Ferrenwald. Names Karl knows from newspapers and station gossip. Closer to home, a DP assembly center operates at a former Wehrmacht barracks outside the city. The occupation reports note frictions. There is resentment when locals see food packages marked UNRRR pass into DP hands. There is theft in both directions. There are rumors that DPs are all criminals, or that Germans will be punished collectively forever. One morning in August 1945, Karl bicycles out to a village to barter books for butter. Near the barracks, he sees a group of men in thin coats standing in the sun, smoking cigarettes they hold like talismans. He notes one man's eyes, too large for his face. It will come back to him years later in a classroom when a boy asks about coal. There are stories that leak into kitchens. A railway worker claims a train full of striped uniforms came through in late April. A priest mentions in a sermon that God will judge. A woman cleaning a commandant's villa finds a box of badges marked with skulls. All of this hovers. Few write it down. Some do. A report from the military government, dated 12 March 1946, Hesse. The German population appears to be increasingly aware of atrocities committed by the regime. However, a pronounced tendency exists to minimize personal responsibility and to emphasize Allied bombing as primary cause of suffering. The sentence has the weight of observation and the limits of generalization. In kitchens, women talk about firestorms. In schoolyards, a child recites dates of air raids with the accuracy of a multiplication table. In Karl's building, a widow from Hamburg tells the story of a night in July 1943 over and over until it becomes an incantation. We held hands. We ran. The sky was white, she says. She stops before the part about the cellar not opening and begins again from the start. There are other stories she does not tell. The arithmetic of housing collapses in the summer of 1946 when the expellees arrive in numbers that overwhelm language. 12 million by the end, 15 by some counts if second waves are included. Silesians, Sudeten Germans, East Prussians, they come in convoys of carts, then in boxcars with chalked windows. They bring what can be tied to a bundle. A woman named Elfriede, born in Brunn, now called Brno, arrives with 2 children and a father whose body has folded into a curve. They are assigned to Karl's building, 3rd floor, 2 rooms, once occupied by a couple who were deported and are not mentioned by name. The city's allocation office issues an order. Zwangseinquartierung for the Schulz family from the Sudetenland in the apartment of Frau M. 2 households in 4 rooms. An inventory is attached to the file. 1 bed frame, 3 chairs, a table, a stove with cracked enamel, a cabinet with a glass door. The arithmetic of space becomes war by other means. The locals resent the newcomers for their demanding voices. The expellees resent the locals for their walls. There is a new vocabulary of insult, reciprocal and low. When discussed in minutes of council meetings, the language is neutral. Integration challenges. In the oral histories compiled decades later, the language is sharp, remembering resentment as if it were fresh paint. They laughed at the way we spoke. They took our horse at the border. They think themselves better. They are always saying they suffered most. The mathematics is simple enough. 1 toilet per floor for 10 people, 1 coal allowance per month for 2 households, 3 cups, 2 plates. The arguments are numerically precise. There is also what is not mentioned. The Registry of Houses lists ownership transfers from 1938 to 1942 with the cold clarity of a ledger. A shop on the corner has new proprietors. The old sign with a Jewish name was removed by ordinance. The city tax office has stamps that state this without stating it. The shop's previous owners were sent east. That is the whole sentence used by neighbors when they speak in low voices. Sent east. The shop sold thread and buttons. Carl remembers a spool of sky blue thread and the hand that turned it, and cannot fit that memory into any safe sentence. The officers of the denazification chambers move through stacks. They shift the burden of pasteness into categories that can be filed. Then the Cold War arrives to adjust the mathematics further. April 1948. The Western zones combine into the Trizone. The Allied policy that had been punitive softens into something like partnership. The Marshall Plan begins to deliver crates of powdered milk and boxes of machinery all across the U.S. zone. The American Economic Cooperation Administration in Germany sets up signs on factory floors. These machines are a gift from the American people. The phrase ERP enters German administrative language. Bundles of steel rods and machine lathes arrive on flatbeds. Photographs show men in coveralls lifting them with new cranes. 20 June 1948. Currency reform. The Deutsche Mark arrives, not as an idea but as paper, crisp and blue. People line up at exchange points to receive 40 DM. The black market collapses in a day. Shop windows that had been empty the week before suddenly display goods. The explanation is not a moral one. It is the mathematics of incentive. Old money no longer buys anything. New money does. Stockpiles held back are released onto shelves. Everyone understands what has happened without requiring an editorial. Ludwig Erhard, in a suit a size too big, announces relaxation of price controls on the radio without Allied approval, and is scolded and then congratulated when the streets show a mood that is new, relief without euphoria. The arithmetic of calories moves sharply upward. The arithmetic of coal follows. In a year, the factory district on the outskirts will hum again. In 5, a new suburban street of identical houses will grow out of a field. Wiesbaden's city office begins to rebuild systematically. Streets are relayed. A new school building is planned on Hohenstaufenstraße. It will take 7 years to raise. In the interim, classes are held in a church basement. Karl returns to teaching in 1948, provisional at first, then permanent in 1950, under Article 31, which allows for the reintegration of former civil servants who had been suspended if not convicted. There is a form to sign agreeing to democratic principles. There is a training course in civic education. There is a checklist of topics. The new democracy does not trust the old teachers entirely, but it needs their craft. Karl assembles lesson plans like sandbags. The 30 Years' War is safe, vast enough to occupy months and far enough to draw no blood in the present. Bismarck is safe. The Weimar Constitution is safe when framed as a failure of structure rather than a set of murdered names. 1933 is taught as a sequence of laws that lead to disaster. The laws can be presented in bullet points without the faces of their victims. A school inspector circulates a memo insisting on emphasizing the criminal character of the regime, but also on avoiding demoralization. A fine balance is to be maintained. The arithmetic of pedagogy is new. Enough truth to pass the test of the Americans, enough tact to keep parents from complaining at the parents' evening. The children bring their own arithmetic. They know the number of nights in the cellar. They know how many brothers did not come back. They know that the ex-Billy boy in the second row owns no winter coat. They know little else. The teacher says, "Jews," once, twice. It hangs. The boys look at their desks. The girls write the word down and underline it once. In 1949, the Federal Republic is founded. The Basic Law is adopted in Bonn, provisional and careful, a text of restraint written by men who had learned what plenary power can do. Karl copies a passage onto the blackboard. Die Würde der Menschen ist unantastbar. Human dignity shall be inviolable. He says the sentence aloud. It feels both like a vow and a phrase removed from the rooms he lives in. The Justice Minister visits schools with pamphlets. We must bind our democracy to law. The law begins to bind as the Cold War hardens the lines. The Berlin blockade is a distant radio hum that becomes a marker. The airlift is described by tonnage. It fits the new mathematics, so many tons of coal, of flour, of chocolate. The children in the class collect tinfoil and rubber bands to make balls of unspecified civic value. Their fathers curse the Russians or curse the Americans, depending on the tone at home. The new arithmetic of loyalty is simple on paper, complicated in kitchens. Denazification winds down. A general amnesty in 1954 will close many files that were never meant to be truly opened. In 1951, laws mark a path back for those suspended under suspicion but never tried. The new police chief had been a member of the party. So was the new mayor's deputy. There are ex-SS men in suits behind desks. The Allied intelligence reports note this with disapproval and move on to files labeled Communist Agitation. The mathematics of internal security shifts. The Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution is founded. It watches the left. Karl recognizes the arithmetic because he lives inside it. Stability requires select amnesia. Economic growth indemnifies. The trade-off is not declared. It is understood. A teacher learns the new grammar the way he learned the old, by looking at who gets promoted and who is not mentioned. A boy in Karl's class, born 1940, asks a question in May 1940, asks a question in May 1951. Why did we lose the war? The question can be answered with an equation that avoids certain terms. The teacher speaks of American industry, of the Soviet winter, of oil and steel. He does not mention the industrialization of murder. He does not talk about a shop on the corner and the flat above it. He writes numbers on the board, tonnages of production, the mathematics of capacity, and he knows both the utility and the cowardice of this. He hears himself. He keeps going. There are brief moments when the membrane between the arithmetic and the faces tears. A survivor visits a church hall in 1946 under the auspices of a Protestant pastor advocating a doctrine later called Kirche im Sozialismus in the East, but in the West simply called public responsibility. The survivor speaks sparingly in a quiet voice that does not suit a hall. There are 20 people present. A parish newsletter later notes, attendance was modest. The topic is difficult. A woman leaves the hall and does not speak on the tram for 10 stops. She will tell no one what she heard. She will buy apples on the way home. The apples are bruised. She will peel them anyway. Karl reads the Frankfurter Rundschau with his breakfast. He reads names of trials. He reads of Dachau trials, later of finally in 1963 of Auschwitz in Frankfurt, where the courthouse will become a stage for a history that had been present as a scent, but rarely as a sentence. He knows men who will shrug at these stories the way a tired man shrugs at a headline about faraway storms. He knows others who tremble. He recognizes himself in both moods. His notebooks preserve the way he both knew and did not know. 14 October 1945. Two men with triangles on their coats near the station. Foreigners. Did they sleep somewhere? 2 February 1947. Snow still falling. Mrs. H. says the Jews in Poland never complained about cold because they did not feel it. This is a monstrous sentence. I said nothing. 20 June 1948. Money changed. New notes smell like paper and soap. Shops have shoes. 23 January 1950. Inspector asked that we treat the years 1933-1945 in an appropriate tone. Must define this tone. 15 September 1952. The dangerous line with the children and the shop on the corner. The arithmetic of municipal commemoration takes hold. Plaques for the dead of the World War. Lines of names in Gothic script. The categories are familiar: fallen sons, missing fathers, the Expellees Guild that meets once a month to recount past villages in the Sudetenland with a ritualness that substitutes for home. These ceremonies distribute grief in ways that the state finds manageable. The murder of the Jews is somewhere else, in death camps located outside the borders of the new state. It is easy to speak of it as a crime without a neighborhood. But the displaced persons camps were in the neighborhood. They were never entirely invisible. They existed in former barracks on the edge of town and in Bavaria's Lake District under maple trees, where the survivors hung washing lines that looked like anyone else's washing lines. The men in the striped uniforms had taken off the stripes as soon as they could. A few of them came into town to buy cigarettes or to have a suit tailored from old cloth. Germans stared and failed to recognize what was present, or recognized and failed to look. The tension between knowing and not knowing becomes a long-term condition. The mathematics of work becomes a religion. The Wirtschaftswunder, if it was a miracle, declared itself in simple tables. Industrial production at index 100 in 1936 drops to 33 in 1936, drops to 33 in 1946, and rises to 1114 by 1952. The Marshall Plan's contribution is partly money and partly temple architecture. Words like productivity and efficiency become talismans. The Americans bring not just machines but concepts, time-motion studies, factory layouts, the idea that coffee breaks can increase output. The German managers, many of them with party pages in their past, nod and memorize the new catechism with a speed that would impress any catechist. There is always a course you can take to become someone acceptable to a different regime. In this order, Karl becomes a functionary of democracy. He teaches the basic law, Article 1 through Article 20. He assigns essays on the limits of power. He takes his students on a field trip to the rebuilt Parliament building of the Landtag. He listens to them marvel at the transparency of glass. He also avoids certain streets on the way home because they are lined with shops that he remembers under other names, and sometimes a window is too clean to look into. The packed trains bring returnees from Soviet camps in 1949. The men step down in uniforms that do not fit their bodies anymore. They are called Heimkehrer and celebrated by speeches. There is no speech on the station platform for the few who return from other places, slower, thinner, with numbers on their arms. Those who see the numbers do not count them. They look away. An Allied officer once wrote that shame is an emotion harder to quantify than hate, but he could see it. "It appears in the way a man does not meet your eye," he wrote in an observation that deserves to be filed under a category that the Spruchkammer never had. Karl's school gets a shipment of textbooks in 1951, approved by the ministry. The section on the war is 22 pages long. Of those, 4 pages treat domestic developments in a language that uses passive constructions like umbrellas. It was ordered. It was carried out. It was decided. The subject of the sentence is never a person. The text focuses on economic mobilization, rationing, loss, and the air war. There is a side box on resistance. The photographs show the ruins of German cities, a picture of the White Rose students, a photo of a deportation train in a caption that reads like a throat clearing. The children see what is on the page. They do not know what is not. There is a report from the Police Presidium of Wiesbaden, October 1951, on the matter of public disturbances related to persons formerly persecuted. It notes several instances of graffiti near a DP camp now being closed. It notes that citizens expressed concern about the behavior of foreigners, and it notes that no charges will be filed for lack of evidence. The mathematics of law enforcement is familiar in every decade, in every regime. A former forced laborer named Alexander writes a letter in broken German to the newspaper in 1946, asking for a pair of boots before he returns to Ukraine. It is printed on the 3rd page. "I worked in a factory in Wiesbaden from 1942 to 1945, he writes. "I live in barracks. I would like to have boots. I thank you." The paper prints his work assignment number and a request to deliver boots to the DP office. An editorial elsewhere that week wonders when the occupation will end. No one answers Alexandra in the archive we have. Perhaps someone did in person. The letter sits on a brittle page. It serves as its own answer. There are battles still being fought in 1952. They are fought in committees about pensions. They are fought over the Lastenausgleich, the burden equalization that levies taxes to compensate those who lost property in the East. The arithmetic is explicit. A percentage of your wealth over a threshold will be taxed to pay a percentage of theirs back. It becomes a national argument. The expellees have a party. They campaign on memory. They speak of home as if it might be a ship you could still board. The word Heimat collects meanings the way a trouser cuff collects dust. The Cold War's arithmetic is as clean as a chalkboard. Divisions stationed in Hesse. American tanks on maneuvers in training fields carved out of forests. Civil defense pamphlets distributed in schools. A boy asks whether the Russians will come again. Karl answers with the geometry of alliances: France, Britain, America. A triangular shield. The boy is not convinced by polygons. He is convinced by the new bicycle his father bought on credit. At night, Karl reads the files he finds in a box marked personal, the ones he has never shown his wife. His Spruchkammer hearing transcript is there. The words Mitlaufe and Entlastung durch Nachbarschaftsjugend have become less like sentences and more like a religious label. He reads the lines where he wrote that he had only joined the professional association to keep his job. It is true, it is also insufficient. The mathematics of guilt is not linear. More membership does not necessarily imply more guilt. Less does not imply less. The variables include knowledge, malice, fear, benefit. He could draw this as a graph. He does not. He writes in a notebook a different kind of equation. Name known plus convenience. Chosen plus convenience. Chosen plus aftermath. He closes the book. A United States Information Service survey in 1951 reports that Germans rank economic situation as their primary concern, justice for past wrongs, below housing and prices. In the country's arithmetic, this is rational. You cannot heat your flat with moral concern. You cannot eat when you are expiating. In the long run, you cannot eat when you are expiating. There is a teachers' conference in Frankfurt in the spring of 1952. 2 sessions are scheduled on teaching about the recent past. One is sparsely attended. The other, on new methods in mathematics, is crowded. A colleague remarks with a dry smile, "We prefer numbers we can control." No one writes this down. Everyone nods this down. Everyone nods. The ministry publishes guidelines that recommend integrating recent historical events into civics rather than teaching them as a separate unit. This lets the architecture of democracy take the place of the ethics of the neighbor. It is a defensible pedagogical choice and a political one. A boy brings a question to Carl after class. "My father said we had to move because the owners came back." Who were the owners? Carl puts his hand on the boy's shoulder and says the sentence without saying the word. "They went away, and then they returned." The boy nods. He is satisfied for now because he is 10. The teacher is not satisfied because he is 40. He returns to his desk and writes the dangerous line. There are moments of greater public reckoning. The Bundestag debates reparations to the State of Israel in 1952. Adenauer speaks of Germany's responsibility. It is a speech that is both moral and strategic. It is a calculation that is also a confession. The math is precise. 3 billion marks from the Federal Republic, a sum that will take years to pay. The debate is heated. There are protests, petitions against. In a school in Wiesbaden, Karl reads the speech in the paper with his coffee and circles a sentence. Unsagbare Verbrechen, unspeakable crimes. He wonders if the grammar is a dodge. If a crime is unspeakable, it is also unspoken. But there is also a truth in the adjective. How would you speak it? The arithmetic of words has limits. By 1952, the DP camps have mostly closed. Many of their former residents have emigrated to Palestine, Israel, to America, to Canada, to Latin America. Some remain, stateless in a country that tries to be new while sitting on foundations poured in old concrete. The barracks are turned into housing for expellees. The circle closes with an ugly neatness. Karl's class takes a test. An essay question asks, "What are the causes and consequences of the 30 Years' War?" The students write about confessional strife, about mercenary armies, about the Peace of Westphalia. They write about famine and burned villages. They do not write about the shop on the corner. They do not write about names. They are too young to be indicted by the failures of their elders. They are entrusted with the task of being new. There is an arithmetic of absolution in the new prosperity. When wages rise, the past declines as a percentage of the present. When a refrigerator hums in a kitchen that once housed 3 families and 1 suitcase father, the space for remembering other kitchens shrinks. This is not evil. It is survival. It is also how forgetting works as a collective project that never presents itself as a project. You simply work. You simply buy. You simply shift pronouns from "we did" to "it happened." Karl is not alone in carrying a file. Thousands do. Some of the files are heavy. Some are 3 pages long. They are placed on shelves. They survive in the Bundesarchiv as fragments of stories that, when read together, make a new narrative that no one in 1952 can see. He is a point in a constellation that takes time to map. 1955. West Germany joins NATO. The Bundeswehr is formed. The mathematics of the army returns in a different uniform with a different oath. The state is older than the students in Karl's class. He teaches them how parliaments work. He avoids the past less frequently now because the children who were born in 1942 are 13. They ask better questions. They have seen fewer men in uniform in their houses, but they have seen the way adults pause before certain words. 1961. The wall is built. The arithmetic of division becomes architecture. The front line is clear on maps. It is also in books and in the unsaid. Karl writes a line in his notebook. The front today also runs through my own sentences. He underlines it twice. 1963. The Auschwitz trials begin in Frankfurt. Schoolchildren read the transcripts in summaries. Professors bring documentation into lecture halls. Television cameras frame faces that are small in history books. Names and numbers are pronounced together. The math and the language finally share a room. A student asks Karl, "What did you know?" He answers honestly, "Pieces, not the whole." It is a sentence that is both true and insufficient. It marks a point on a line. It does not describe the function. In his last years of teaching, Karl revises his lesson plans.